On the Hawkeye Sports Network from Learfield, this is the Fight for Iowa podcast, brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy, proud partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Big Ten Conference. Also by Iowa's Corn Farmers of the Iowa Corn Growers Association and Iowa Corn Promotion Board. You may think Iowa grows corn, but the truth is, corn grows Iowa. Also brought to you by Shields. We're right there with you in Des Moines, Sioux City, Iowa City, and Cedar Falls. This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
One of the greatest golfers in Iowa Hawkeye history was a black man. George Roddy once set the Finkbine course record, shooting a 72 with nines of 31 and 41. Roddy rarely lost over several years of competition, starting in 1929. Sadly, he couldn't defeat racism. Banned from country clubs where most prominent tournaments were held because he was African American. George Roddy never got to compete for a Big Ten title. He won several in-state university meets and all of his head-to-head duels. Growing up in Keokuk and unable to afford a bus ticket to campus his freshman year, Roddy walked the 87 miles to Iowa City. The amazing story of new Hawkeye Hall of Famer George Roddy is the subject matter for this week's Fight for Iowa, along with field hockey's Amy Fowler. Plus, Iowa football, in search of a consistent offense, is preparing for cross-state rival Iowa State with the Cy-Hawk Trophy at stake. This week's show is sponsored by Athletico, Iowa Corn, and Shields. I'll be right back.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
Oh, you know that old injury of yours, the one in your knee or maybe back? Instead of going to the doctor and then doing physical therapy, why not start with therapy first? Athletico Physical Therapy is changing the whole healing process around. Their physical therapists will find the source of your pain and help fix it. Start with them and start living pain-free. Just like that.
It all starts with Athletico Physical Therapy. Schedule your free assessment at athletico.com. No prescription needed. Proud partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
Golf writer Rick Brown recently chronicled the amazing career of 5'5" George Roddy from Keokuk. Roddy entered Iowa in the late 1920s and became not only the sport's first African American, but its first captain and letter winner. Roddy was one of 7 inductees to the Iowa Letter Winners Club and Athletics Hall of Fame this past week. Roddy, born in 1908, passed away in 1988. In between, he trailblazed his way across the state with an undefeated individual match record and led the Hawkeyes to a pair of all-university team titles. The mechanical engineer received his degree in 1932. He ultimately settled with his family in Indianapolis and won 2 City Am titles there. Roddy coached high school and collegiate golf and very well could have turned professional, but declined because of family and a stable job. George Roddy was represented at last week's Hawkeye Hall of Fame ceremony by grandson Karl, who states George Roddy believed in the goodness of people from all walks of life, never losing his temper or raising his voice in the face of racism.
Education and dedication. He was a real family guy. If he had never mentioned golf, I would have never known that he was a golfer. He was a terrific golfer who just happened to be African American at a time where it wasn't really appreciated, but he carried on with quiet confidence and irrepressible fortitude, and his family, he inspired his whole family, and he was an engineer. My brother's an engineer. My great niece is an engineer. We're just very proud of his accomplishments and what he meant to our family, what he instilled in all of us. Determination, courage, dedication, resilience. He was just a tremendous person. He was a lot of fun. He was a pretty serious guy. He was a martinet, really. He was a strict disciplinarian, but he always went lenient on his grandkids,
That's why you're here tonight.
Yeah. If you made a mistake, he would correct it right then. He even gave me a whipping on the golf course once. He took golf very seriously. You could not disrespect the game. I had an attitude one day on the golf. He whipped my brother and me, right? And we laughed about it years later. But, and one reason why he would do that is because he loved us so much, he just wanted to get it over with. So he would discipline us real quickly and get over. As far as his accomplishments in golf, he was understated. He wasn't a rebel rouser. He wasn't a revolutionary. He wasn't a freedom fighter. He left that for others. He knew later in his career that he was a pioneer and trailblazer, whether he liked it or not. He accepted that, but he never embraced it. He was like Joe Louis, only in golf. Joe Louis just wanted to box and enjoy the simple pleasures in life. My grandfather just wanted to golf and enjoy the simple pleasures in life, only he was a lot more intelligent than Joe Louis also.
Looking at his numbers and how he played the game, it's remarkable to me because, to your point, there were a lot of courses, a lot of doors closed to a young African American, and to be an outstanding golfer was even more rare. And yet it never, at least when you look at the stats and you read his history, it didn't affect his game one bit.
No. He just had that kind of resilience and resolve. He just believed in himself. He believed that anything is possible if you do it. If you accomplish it, it's possible. And we're all like that today. And you know, he started the whole thing, the legacy of the whole family. The modern Roddy family, he's at the forefront. And I can't thank him enough. I was very close to him. And I know that he's with me tonight.
What's your handicap?
I'm a lousy golfer, and you know what? He never let me beat him on one single hole. I played with him for years growing up. His competitiveness was legendary. He never let me win one single hole. Now, you would think for posterity and nostalgia's sake, for pride and goodness sake, he would let me win at least one hole. He didn't.
What was the best club in his bag?
One thing about George Roddy people don't realize is that he was 5 foot 5.5 inches. So he had to compete against much larger players. Remember that he was an engineering student. He took his woods and extended them all 6 inches. He also altered all the shafts to get more lift and length. And I wish he had patented that so we'd all be multimillionaires today. And a lot of today's golfers are not that big. No. So they have great clubs. He had lousy clubs and still went undefeated in his individual match career.
I've read a number of articles on the great Charlie Sifford. He was Charlie Sifford before Charlie Sifford.
He actually got together with Charlie Sifford and Lee Elder in 1960, and they were trying to determine which African American should be the first one to try to get the PGA card or membership. And my grandfather was born in 1908. Charles Sifford was born in 1922. Lee Elder was born in 1934. So my grandfather decided he was already married. He was already well established. He already had a stable job. And Charles Sifford was much more of a rebel. He wanted to be the first African American on the PGA Tour, and he succeeded in 1960. And Lee Elder, of course, was the first African American to play in the Masters. But yeah, he's probably one reason why he's like a forgotten hero, I think, is because it was all at the amateur level. But if you take a real close look at his record and examine it, you'll see that he's one of the best amateurs ever.
And now George Roddy is in the University of Iowa Athletics Hall of Fame. After a word from our sponsors, you'll hear from one of the field hockey Hawkeye greats, Amy Fowler, who entered the hallowed hall last week.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
There's a sense of pride that comes from the life of a farmer. How many people can say they have a famous tan named after them, or be known for their wave when they drive past neighbors and strangers alike on a 2-lane road? Whether it's a farmer's tan or the farmer's wave, we are proud to be known for a lot of things. We feel that pride every night at the dinner table, knowing we feed our family and yours. Iowa Corn is proud to be on the sidelines cheering on the Iowa Hawkeyes. In Iowa, we grow corn, but the truth is corn grows Iowa.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
Iowa field hockey's Amy Fowler was a 3-time All-American, earning first-team honors in 1991 and 92. A 3-time Big Ten first-team member for 3 straight seasons, Fowler was the league's Defensive Player of the Year in 1992 and participated in the U.S. Olympic Sports Festival. Fowler played for Coach Beth Beglin and would go on to coach herself at James Madison and Dartmouth. A New Jersey native, Fowler enunciates her heart will always be at Iowa, and she is humbled by the Hall of Fame honor.
Joining a group of women that are just amazing and have been my idols, and some of them my teammates, and I was so proud of them for getting in, and I never thought I would be one of those people. I know I had personal accolades, but my personal accolades here were driven by being the best that I could be for my team and trying to be number one. And Beth instilled a lot of things in me that I carried with me to this day, and instilling in my children. And Dr. Grant, the fact that I had an opportunity to play here is just beyond my wildest dreams. Like, I bleed black and gold. I will always be a Hawkeye. So this is like still surreal for me, but definitely appreciate it.
And to do it, or to be inducted on the 50th anniversary of women's athletics, Title IX, Lisa Salucci winning her 100th career match last week, the fourth Hawkeye coach to do so, among a Hall of Fame list of coaches. Must make you and your former teammates so proud to be a part of this program.
Very proud. Yeah, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Lisa. I dragged her down to JMU with me for 1 year. I tried to get her the year before, but I didn't know she had a fifth year. And Lisa, I've just been a huge fan of Lisa and a huge fan of Tracy. Was my assistant, so I loved what she was doing with the program. I mean, we just have been it's an amazing run of field hockey coaches here at Iowa, and Lisa's just one to the list of wonderful women that have influenced so many young women, and it's been awesome. Yeah.
Hawkeyes have won a dozen Big Ten titles in the last 2 years across both men's and women's sports. What's that say about a university that does it the right way academically and athletically?
Yeah, I think, the right way and the Iowa way is what I was taught when I walked in the door from Dr. Grant, from Beth, from, watching other coaches, Vivian Stringer, Gail Blevins, Diane, Dan Gable, Hayden Fry. It was like, it didn't matter which department. We were in our separate athletic departments, but we always felt like one big family. I think the Title IX equities that were here, compliments of all of the athletic directors on both sides, really the opportunities that were available for men and women at a place like this. And we're not the biggest Big Ten school. I remember when Penn State joined and everybody was like, I'm from the East Coast. Penn State's like, oh, we're going to win the Big Ten because we're Penn State. And I was like, no, you're not. And they didn't for a while. They have done very well. But it's just I can't explain how special this place is, and I think we win titles because kids come in. I always thought Beth and the staffs here found diamonds in the rough and turned them into a polished, finished product. And it sounds like, even listening to the other stories, Dallas Clark, he's playing pro. He comes in as like the scrubby, walk on. You don't have a scholarship. I appreciated that Beth gave me, an opportunity to be here, but I didn't come in on a full ride. And by the time I finished, I finished with something that was something I earned, right? So that's what I really appreciated about this place.
Fowler is the 11th field hockey player to enter the Hawkeye Hall of Fame that totals 219 athletes. There are over 12,000 men and women who've lettered at the university. Others inducted this year were football's Dallas Clark, wrestler Dan Holm, Carrie Knopf from softball, baseball great Keith Noreen, and Nancy Leah Underwood from swimming and diving. I'll have a final thought in just a minute.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
Here we go. Exciting adventures await. Grab your bucket list and keep the fun going all summer long. Pitch a tent, grab a sleeping bag, and sleep as a family under the stars. Fire up the grill and host a backyard barbecue. Visit a local trail for a hike or a drive to a state park for an all-day family adventure. With all there is to do this summer, we encourage you to get outside and make new memories. Whatever you do this summer, Shields is right there with you.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
The Hawkeye football team hopes to build on a 6-game winning streak over cross-state rival Iowa State Saturday at Kinnick Stadium. The Hawkeyes won last year's slugfest at Ames 27-17 and will rely heavily once again on its defense and special teams. Iowa surrendered just 120 yards of offense to South Dakota State and punched out a pair of safeties in last week's 7-3 victory. Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week, Torrey Taylor, punted 10 times for an average of 48 yards, but it was his placement that marveled. 6 punts ended up inside the 12, and 2 of those were downed inside the 5. Iowa and Iowa State will meet for the 69th time, and it's the 45th anniversary since the two schools renewed the rivalry in 1977. I'm Gary Dolphin for Fight for Iowa. Go Hawks.
Hawkeye fans, remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. Once you become a Fight for Iowa podcast subscriber, you'll automatically receive the latest episodes of the Fight for Iowa podcast, the Hawkeyes Voice podcast, Hawk Talk replays, exclusive game day content, and more. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Hawkeye Sports Network.